Are we good? Can we rock and roll? Ziggy? Yo, everything feels as if it's stopped.
Ready to go.
Okay, all good. Okay, let's read the infamous Colossians 2, verse 16. Let no one therefore judge you in eating or in drinking or in respect of a festival or new moon or the Sabbaths. Okay. This verse quoted out of context, none of us are unfamiliar to, all right? And reading Colossians 2 verse 16 out of context and quoting it as is probably one of the most ridiculous things when it gets to a topic like the festivals or the Sabbaths. And another point I want to make about this is reading the scriptures just the way I did it now, quoting a verse, and in this situation, quoting a specific verse, which has done so much harm because it's been read out of context, is the very thing I want to put out blunt here that we want to change. It's a culture that I believe I'm called to play a role in, that we stop in our lives, and that is pulling verses out of context and reading them and trying to extract meaning from them without understanding how they fit into a much, much bigger passage. In many cases, into a book, not even a chapter. Remember, the Bible wasn't written in chapters. The Bible wasn't written in verses. The Bible was written as books, as scrolls, parts of scrolls that was presented to very specific audiences. And the people who wrote to those audiences were very specific people with a very specific agenda, very specific worldview. If we go and pull a single verse, by the way, which was delineated by humans, and use that to expand or to roll out our theology, we are on absolute thin ice. And I hate to admit that this is the way the church very often is run. It's built on verses pulled out of context, and basically theology built on those out of context verses. If you read Second Colossians, and I'm not even meaning the whole of Colossians, because you should read the whole of the book. The book is written, the letter of Colossians is written to an audience, to a congregation, and whoever is going on here, I think it's Paul, is trying to make a very big point. And when he gets to verse 16 in the second chapter, he said, let no one therefore. If you read a therefore in the scriptures, hello, Kerry, Trillingays. If you read a clause like, let no one therefore judge you, you know that there's things preceding this that is super important. Sorry, I just need to switch off my WhatsApp in the background. When you read everything leading up to verse 16, this entire chapter is about Christ. It's about Yeshua being the mystery of God. And when you start getting to terms with what Paul is writing here, that, I mean, if I quickly, I'm just going to tap on some parts here in the beginning of verse 2. For I wish you to know what a great struggle I've had, in order that their minds, their hearts might be encouraged, being knit together in love, and all the riches of the entire confirmation of understanding, true knowledge of the secret of Elohim and of the Father of the Messiah, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And this I say so that no one deceives you with enticing words. For though I'm absent in the flesh, yet I'm with you in the spirit, rejoicing to see that your good order and steadfastness of your believers in Messiah. And it goes on. Then he says, it talks about Messiah having been rooted and built up in him, established on the belief. Next verse, so that no one makes a prey of you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men. And it goes on. And then eventually you realize that Paul is trying to communicate to us that Christ, the Messiah, or let me put it like the expression of the universal Messiah in Jesus Christ, in Yeshua. You have to kind of grapple with this unfathomable concept before you get to verse 16, where he said, let no one therefore judge you in eating and drinking, or in respect of the festivals, new moon, or on the Sabbath. And then he says in verse 17, which are a shadow of what is to come, the body of Messiah. Okay? Everything taken into context. This verse has been abused, used in the wrong way, in so many wrong ways. And a lot of people just read it in a one-dimensional way. Let no one judge you in eating or drinking. In other words, what they hear is, I don't celebrate the Sabbath. I don't care about the festivals because it's Old Testament. I don't care about the new moons, and no one should judge me. This is the one-dimensional reading of it. The other one-dimensional reading of it, which is, I don't know if it's better or worse, is to say, hey, I celebrate the festivals. I observe the Shabbat, etc., etc. Let no one of the other side judge me about it. That's the other one-dimensional read. The correct reading is that the festivals, the Sabbaths, the new moons, everything leading up to Christ is basically there to point us to Christ. It's to help us get a grip on Christ. It's to help us get the fuller picture of what was the intention of the Father. But what we do is, because we're not that interested in God, and I say this kind of empathically, we're really not that interested in God. Most people in the Christian faith are far more interested in what the faith could mean for them. I think this is the sadness, this is the darkness of Christianity, is that we're not all that interested in God in a number of ways. Most people I know is much more interested in, what can this walk with God mean to me? What does it hold? What is in this for me? But if we can turn it around and say, wait a moment, this world might not have just been made for me and everything that I could get from it. You see, the Jews have a number of other sources above and beyond the written scriptures. It's called the Oral Torah, and there's several sources in that. But there's one entry, and I'm going to go in the Babylonian Talmud. I think it's the Talmud 93b, where it says the world was created for the sake of the Messiah. And although there's a number of things that the Jews say and do that I'm really very uncomfortable with, that is something that had me thinking for so many years. The world was created for the sake of the Messiah. And I want you to think about that for a while. Take time and think about this super interesting statement. Because, in Christianity, again, we've been taught that the Messiah was made for me. The Messiah was made for us. Okay? But stop for a moment and think, what if it was all meant for him? Imagine what a different perspective on everything that would hold. And that's just something I want us to think about. Okay, Colossians 2 verse 16. I'm reading this because I want to state, and I did state it the previous round, what everything that we're talking about, and especially we're going into a season of some of the most important festivals now, starting on the 19th of September. It's a very important season of festivals, but I want us to kind of go through the 7 festivals. More so, I want us to go to even including the Shabbat, and start getting a grip of what God is, I believe, trying to convey to us. I want us to read something, and therefore I'm going to share a little screen. Sorry, I know everybody can read, but I'm going to read it together, and then I can comment, and we can all comment on it, and then it's in front of us. So just bear with me for a second. Share. Okay. Can somebody just tell me if they see the Feast of the Lord introduced up there? Is it good? Okay. Do I need to make it a little bit larger? Yes? There is a way to do that. Stand by. Okay. Sorry, I'm not underestimating your intelligence that I'm going to read it out loud, but I think this is very worthwhile. Okay, the Feast of the Lord introduced. Fuchs holds here that the Feast of the Lord constitute not only a list of holy days, but actually an outline of God's calendar from eternity to eternity. More specifically, these feasts can be said to trace the unfolding of God's redemptive purpose through the ages. Hear that sentence. These feasts can set to trace the unfolding of God's redemptive purpose through the ages. Regarding Leviticus 23, by the way, Leviticus 23 is one, I would say, is one of the landmark chapters in the Old Testament, delineating the feasts themselves. Okay, regarding Leviticus 23 in the New Testament, nowhere is the continuity between the testaments so clear as in the festival calendar. As will be discussed below, the historical and retrospective function of these feasts can be seen in the Old Testament, but according to Fruchtenbaum, the prophetic and typological significance of the Feast of the Lord also provide an outline of the entire program of redemption from the death of Yeshua to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. Very importantly, the first 4 festivals were fulfilled by the program of the first coming, while the last 3 festivals of Leviticus 23 will be fulfilled by the program of the second coming. The feasts of the Lord are prominently mentioned in Leviticus 23, Numbers 28 and 29, and Deuteronomy 16. Whereas Deuteronomy 16 stresses the pilgrimages of the feasts, by the way, let me just chip in here. The Bible mentions 3 major pilgrim festivals of pilgrim, let's call it 3 major pilgrimages from wherever you are in the world to Jerusalem on an annual basis. Okay, and I'll mention a little bit more of that later, but basically the first 3 festivals, the single central festival, and the last 3 festivals are seen as the 3 major pilgrimages. Let's just go back there. Deuteronomy 16 stresses the pilgrimages of the feasts. Numbers 28, 29 emphasize the offerings, and Leviticus 23 focuses on the feasts themselves. Leviticus 23 describes the Sabbath together with 7 feasts, namely the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the First Fruits. We're going to talk about them tonight, but just note here, if you're Jewish or if you've hung out in the land of Israel around those first 3 festivals, very often people would either refer to it as the Passover, the Pesach in Hebrew, or as Chag HaMatzot, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, rarely ever do you hear anybody speak about the Feast of First Fruits, and rarely do you hear that people separate those 3 festivals. They normally call it either the Passover or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, 4th one, the Feast of the Harvest, which is Sukkot, Shavuot, sorry. The Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and the Feast of Tabernacles, which is Sukkot. These feasts are of the Lord are appointed seasons for holy convocations, Moedim, like it mentions there. And then Wenham notes that according to Genesis 1 verse 14, maybe for a second, let's just pause right there. I'm going to stop the sharing. Let's just quickly read Genesis 1 verse 14. I find this is super important. Who of you have celebrated an official Shabbat with the lighting of the candles, the bread, and everything? There's been a number of you. Okay, good. Now, let's quickly read Genesis 1 verse 14. If you ask people, hey, what's the purpose of the sun? What's the purpose of the moon? Most people would default to tell you, oh, it's about lighting the earth during the day, or lighting the earth during the night. Let's hear what says what's written in Genesis 1:14. And Elohim said, "Let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens, to separate day from night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and for years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens, to give light on the earth." It mentions 3 functions. Listen to this very closely. Let the lights come to be in the expanse of them, to separate the day and the night. Okay, so it's separate night and day, and let them be for signs and appointed times, 2nd function, and for days and for years, 3rd function. The 4th one, you could maybe group the 2 and 3 together, and let them be for light. Light is the 3rd function. The more important function here is to bring separation and to mark the seasons and the times. Super important. If you look at the Hebrew calendar as a whole, it's a mixture of moon and sun that tells us not only where we are in a 12-month cycle, but what is going on an agricultural level, and more so on a significant happenings level. All right. Something in our calendar which follows only the sun, by the way. The moon has nothing to do with the calendar. The Hebrew calendar follows both the moon and the sun. Both are important. Therefore, since the moon and the sun calendar are, I think it's 11 days they drift 11 days apart every year. Therefore, every fourth year, they add another month to the Hebrew calendar so that the moon and the sun part comes in sync again. Otherwise, what would have happened is the agricultural feast, and therefore the feast of Yahweh, would drift out of sync with the actual seasons. And that would obviously become a very big problem, because the festivals of Yahweh is all about significant happenings in the land, significant happenings on the agricultural land. Okay, let's go back to where we were. Like that. Okay, Wenham notes that according to Genesis 1:14, the sun and the moon were created to be for signs and seasons, literally meetings, or in Hebrew, moed. Okay, in Leviticus 23:2, 4, and 44, reference is made to the Lord's meetings, and in verse 37, to appointed seasons, moedim. Moedim is basically the male plural of moed. From the cross until his second advent to the earth, Jesus Christ typologically fulfilled or will still fulfill the feast of the Lord, not in terms of the Mosaic covenant, according to the Aaronic priesthood, but in terms of the new covenant as high priest, according to the order of Melchizedek. Those of you who are not familiar with Melchizedek, we read about him in a number of interesting places. For example, he's the guy who met Abram, and Abram broke bread with him and had wine with him and actually gave him a tenth of everything that he owned. But you kind of read about Melchizedek and you don't know where, you don't know where he comes from, and you don't know what's his purpose, you don't know what his story, you know nothing about him. But by the way, the word Melchizedek in Hebrew means my king of righteousness. Malach in Hebrew is king. If you say Malchi, it means my king, and Tzedek is righteousness. And then you know from ancient Hebrew, Tzedek means to follow the correct or the prescribed path. So it's literally my king of the correct path, who is Yeshua. All right. According to Kale, the Sabbath is the governing principle in the feast of the Lord, and this annual cycle of feasts had its center and starting point in the Sabbath. The Sabbath basically means to rest or to cease from work. God rests from his work of creation on the seventh day, as found in Genesis 2:3. But since the entrance of sin, God has been working to achieve his redemption and kingdom programs, John 5:17. As depicted in the history of the Old Testament believers in Israel, God is not only working to provide redemption rest out of Egypt, but follow this one. God is not only working to provide redemption rest out of Egypt, but also Canaan rest. By the way, the Bible doesn't call it this. This is this writer's perspective, but I do like it. He says, Canaan rest in the promised land. Canaan rest means to cease struggling with the enemy. Something why this is important. I battle with my heart, and I've been in the ICU this week, or the past week. That's why I couldn't make our previous lesson. So many people, and I appreciate that they pray for me, but so many people give the devil so much bandwidth in all of what happens in our lives. A lot of people did not stop to say, hey, let's just think what God is busy doing. Immediately, they credit the devil as if the devil is God's counterfeit, as if the devil is God's equal, And in a sense, what I believe is if we really understand what it means to enter the rest of God, it means to stop struggling with the enemy, start living a life where the enemy isn't all that powerful. Does it make sense? Okay, Canaan rest means to cease struggling with the enemy. This type of rest enables the believer to conquer sin, and Canaan rest is a symbol of consecration rest, having to do with the subjection of one's mind, will, and your heart to God's power. Referring to Psalm 95, the privilege to enter into my rest may be understood, as Gleason argues, as the right to worship before the personal presence of Yahweh, which could be forfeited by hardened, rebellious hearts like those of the Exodus generation. If New Testament believers remain faithful, they can joyfully and confidently approach the throne of grace, where Jesus Christ, their high priest, will make intercession for them. And it goes on. I'm going to stop here. There's more things here. I did send you the link. What is important about this whole, and please make time, it's just these 3-4 paragraphs, read them. The more we come to terms with the fact that the festivals, most specifically the festivals, gives us an annual, almost a script, a series of dress rehearsals by which we come to terms with what God is busy doing. The whole redemptive purpose that God has in Christ, rolled out as an annual repetition, rolled out as a script, as a dress rehearsal that we can every year commemorate. Some of the festivals had been fulfilled, and we'll briefly look at them tonight. Some of them we are awaiting fulfillment, but all of these together on a year-to-year cyclical basis give us a template of what God is busy doing. Does it make sense? Now, I know the festivals is not a gewilde, it's not a famous subject, because we're so stuck in this old way of thinking that it's Jewish, it's Old Testament, and we've been groomed in the church to believe that there's a separation between the Old and the New. I think the problem is that we call them an Old and a New Testament. Nowhere in the Bible does it speak about an Old Testament and a New Testament. Nowhere in the Bible does it speak about a testament. You get the word berit, that's a cutting or a covenant in Hebrew. You have a covenant and you have a renewed covenant. This is important because it doesn't say it's old as in the sense that it doesn't have a function anymore. What it is old in that sense, because I know the whole book of Hebrews talk about the obsolescence of the old covenant. The reason why it uses that kind of language is because certain things have happened on that timeline which had been fulfilled. And we need to understand fulfillment. We need to understand how fulfillment actually plays out in Christ so that we have a progressive view of what is happening in the Bible. I know this is ironic because the Bible, in a sense, is not a progressive book. It's completely cyclical. But in this sense, that there's a part of the covenant that's been fulfilled, in that sense, there's progression. That just as a side note. Okay. Let's quickly turn to, is julle nog daar? Are you still following? You're allowed to say something. I'm going to do 5 minutes and then we can discuss. Let's turn to Leviticus 23. All right. We've touched on this. Okay, just a quick, I'm going to share another screen for those who have missed last week. Can you, okay, wait, let me make this a little bit bigger. That would be like width. Okay, let's go here. Before we look at Exodus 23, Leviticus 23. Exodus 10:9, we will go, for we must hold a feast to Yahweh. That word feast is the word chag, and it comes from the verb chagag in Hebrew. There you have it. And it means to move in a circle. The reason why this is important is the Hebrews understand from a fundamental point of view that what God is busy doing is cyclical. All right? It repeats. Therefore, it's not you hold a festival once and then hopefully you understand what it meant and you move on with your life, because that's very often how the way we read the Bible. I've read Psalm 23, I kind of get what it's about, then I move on and I don't read it again. This is not the way the Hebrews look at it. The Hebrews look at it from a way, I read Psalm 23 now, it speaks to me. And when I come back to Psalm 23, let's say in a month's time or in a year's time, it speaks to me on another level because I've moved in a circle that have deepened my understanding. Okay, so this whole idea from we will go, for we must hold a feast to Yahweh. Literally, Moses tells Pharaoh here, we will go, for we must hold a thing, a noun, which is going to repeat. Every year. All right, that's super funny. Okay, Moed in Hebrew is a very often called a meeting or an appointed time. It can also mean a appointed place. This comes from the verb in Hebrew ya'ad, which means it's to fix on the one end, but it's also to meet. It means two things because the Hebrews being a communal, what do you call a communal clan. They understood that the meeting part was because they're a group, but literally ya'ad, it refers to the hand. It means you have to fix it. You have to make a fixed thing about it. And if you put the two concepts together, you have to make this meeting, which is an appointed time or an appointed place. It needs to be fixed and it needs to be repeated in a group, as a community, as a congregation, as an assembly. Okay, so again, in Leviticus 23, we read about the Mo'edei Yahweh, the appointed times of Yahweh. Not a single place does it say Mo'edei Yodim, which would have meant the appointed times of the Jews. It literally says Mo'edei Yahweh. It is the feasts of Yahweh. It's the appointed times of Yahweh. Leviticus 23:2, the set feasts of Yahweh, Mo'edei Yahweh, which you shall proclaim, call out, to be convocations. A convocation is a gathering of set apartness. These are my set feasts. Okay, very important. Okay, we're back at Leviticus 23. Gee, these are just very important things. In other words, a number of mistakes when we read this, because we kind of don't hear it unless we kind of remind ourselves or kind of remind one another. It's not the Jews' feasts. These are appointed times. They're fixed meetings designed, instigated by Yahweh for Yahweh. Okay, it's not the Christians' feast. It's not the Jewish feast. It's not. No one owns this. It's the feast that Yahweh has designed so that when we're in covenant with Him, when we walk with Him, when we journey with Him, we observe these to get an understanding, a repetitive understanding of what He's busy doing. All right, Leviticus 23, verse 1. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, the appointed times of Yahweh, again, not the appointed times of the Jews, which you proclaim as set apart gatherings, my appointed times are these. And then it starts with the Sabbath in verse 3. 6 days work is done. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, a set apart gathering. You do no work. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh in all your dwellings. For those of you who've been in Israel, not even for those who've been in a community where this concept is understood, you can understand a community that celebrates the fact that within 6 days, everything that I intend to do in a week must be done and must be finished in 6 days. If it's not finished, that doesn't spill over into the seventh day. The seventh day has a different function. That day, I almost want to say spiritually, genetically, is designed to remake you, to almost rebreathe you. Okay? And one thing I've noted about Christians is Christians very often want to say, let's figure out what the principle is. So God made the earth in 6 days, one day. So I rest on a Tuesday because that pass my better. That fits my program much better. So this week I'll rest on this 7-day period. I'll rest on a Tuesday, next I will do it on a Thursday. I'm not saying you're not going to rest out and you're not going to feel better. But what I'm saying is this is exactly what Adam and Eve did. Say, thank you very much for your kind suggestion that we shouldn't eat of that little tree. But you know what? After consultation with the serpent, you know, we'll decide. Thank you very much. But this is exactly what we do. We try to make principles out of things because you know what a principle does to us. It allows us to not be obedient. And this is a very big problem. This is the problem within Christianity, is to say, let me just figure out what the principle is, because then I can just decide for myself. I can figure out whether I like it or whether I find any benefit in it. And then if I find benefit in it, I'll do it. But the problem here is it says 6 days, and the seventh day, not 6 days out of 7, you work and pick one that you feel comfortable with. Now, I'm not going onto a rule base here. This, to me, is coming to terms with the character of God. When God says something, and He's the designer, He's the architect, He is the beginning, He's the end, He's everything, He's above all, He's in front, He's behind, He is everything. When He suggests that we do a 7th-day rest, I suggest that we listen to Him. You know, and not try to figure out how can we outsmart Him by resting on a day that feels nicer. You know, and I know this is not simple. I'm not saying this is not. There are days. I mean, some of my friends are doctors. They work in emergency halls on Saturdays. I'm not saying this is a simple principle. What I am saying is we should try to read the scriptures as if with the stuff that God says isn't like, I give you a number of options. Just, you know, try what is working for you. He's saying, I've given the 7th day a different spiritual genetic. deal with it. Okay, we can figure out how you will do that later, but deal with the fact that God knows better. All right. Sorry, I'm going on and I'm repeating myself. Now, verse 4, these are the appointed times of Yahweh, again, set apart gatherings, which you are to proclaim at their appointed times. At their appointed times. Proclaim them at their appointed times. I'm just reading the scriptures here. This is strong language. Okay? Strong language for us mortals who wants to decide for ourselves. Verse 5, in the first new moon, on the 14th day of the new moon, between the evenings, the Hebrew word there is Ben Erevim. This is a Hebrew idiom. Between the evenings doesn't mean between tonight and tomorrow night. That's not between the evenings. Between the evenings, Ben Erevim in Hebrew means between sunset and pitch dark. The Hebrews understood the two evenings to be the two parts of the evening becoming darker until pitch dark. Makes sense? So when the sun sets, that's the first evening. When it gets pitch dark, it's the second evening. And that kind of period, we call it dusk. Between these two is called Bein Erevim, between the evenings. So here it says, in the first new moon, on the 14th day of the new moon, between the evening is the Pesach to Yahweh. It's the Passover to Yahweh. And on the 15th day of this new moon is the festival of Matzot. Matzot is unleavened bread. It's the plural form for the word matzah. You may have noticed that unleavened during the festival they eat matzah. Okay, Matzot is the the female plural for the word matzah. Is the festival of matzah again to Yahweh, not for the Jews, not for us who try to be Judaic or or Judaizers, what Paul calls them. People who try to make people Jews are called Judaizers. Okay, Feast of Unleavened Bread. On the first day, you have a set-apart gathering. It's speaking about this Feast of Unleavened Bread. On the first day, you have a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. And you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh for 7 days. On the seventh day, the last day, is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. Curiously, this year, it falls, this first day falls on a Saturday, and the seventh day falls on a Saturday, which is in any case Sabbath. It's as if God says, let me just help you, because I'm not trying to put burdens on you. I'm just helping you. There's already Sabbath. You just need to kind of listen closely. On the first day, you have a set apart gathering, and you do no servile work, and you shall bring an offering. Oh, sorry, I read that. Verse 9, and Yahweh said to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, and you shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruit of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh for your acceptance on the morning after the Sabbath. The priest waves it. When you read this, and you've not studied this and you've not participated in this just feels like a bunch of rules. But once you start reading what's going on there and you start seeing, you just allow yourself to hear what God is trying to say and how God is using the festivals to point towards intricate detail in the life of Jesus. It becomes absolutely fascinating. I mean, I think for next time, I'll draw a timeline and we can look at just how this interesting, it mentions a Sabbath day on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It mentions a day before that called the Passover. It mentions another seventh day Sabbath. Okay, so it looks like a normal week, but it's important in this situation that there's a first and a last day, which are Sabbaths. And then it says that in the middle of this week, on the day after the weekly Sabbath, there's a feast called the First Fruits. Now, if you look at what happened in the time of Jesus' life, you realize that the scriptures tell us that there had been all these strange rest days, which coincide with the days of the festivals, because the Jews observed them. Then it starts making sense how just in this three-tier event, Pesach, unleavened bread, and first fruit, Jesus was exactly crucified on a certain day. He was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, not like we celebrate in pagan Christianity where we say, Jesus was in the grave kind of 1.5 days. I mean, Friday afternoon and on a Sunday morning he was out vibes. And then we go super creative. Yes, Friday is day 1, Saturday is day 2 and Sunday he was out, but let's just throw it in the mix, maybe 3 days. Okay, but so if you're super creative, you may get to 3 days, but you're not going to get to 3 nights, which, by the way, is what he said in Matthew 12. I'll give an adulterous generation a single sign, and that is the sign of Jonah, the sign of Jonah, that says the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. So these festivals have all been fulfilled. And my commitment is when we get to next year, when these feasts repeat, we will go into a lot of depth. Tonight, I just want to say, and a lot of this is a repeat from last week, because we cannot repeat this enough. These 3 festivals, which together forms the first pilgrim feast, as mentioned in Deuteronomy, in Numbers 28-29, they're called the pilgrim feasts of the Lord. These 3 together, sometimes referred to as the Pesach or Passover, sometimes referred to as as unleavened bread. These 3 together have all been fulfilled in absolute, ridiculous, intricate detail in the life and death of Jesus. And if you start looking at the detail, how Jesus was brought into the city of Jerusalem on the 10th of the month, if you read in Numbers 9, where it says that actually Exodus 12, we can quickly look at that. And then I'm done. Exodus 12:1, and Yahweh spoke to Moses, and said, and to Aharon in the land of Mitzrayim, that's Egypt, this new moon is the beginning of new moons to you, and is the first new moon of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation. Do you know how the Bible never speaks of months? There isn't a word for month, by the way, in Hebrew. It speaks of a new moon. The word for new moon, help quickly, Christy, somebody who speaks Hebrew. Rosh Chodesh, I can't remember the word now. Head of the month.
Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh.
Rosh Chodesh, thanks, Ati. Rosh Chodesh, my mind is
Rosh Chodesh.
Rosh Chodesh. It speaks of the head of not of the moon, but of the new moon. Okay? Literally, there isn't a word for month in Hebrew. It literally means a new moon. That's when Paul refers to the new moons, it's not that it's some other spiritual or religious ritual. That's just the Hebrews understood months as reference to when the moon was sighted. Okay, that's why in Exodus 12 you see this new moon is the beginning of new moons for you. It is the first new moon of the year. In our language, it would mean it's the first month of the year. Speak to all the congregation. On the 10th day of the new moon, each of you is to take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for an entire household. And if the household is too small, it goes on, tick, tick, tick. The lamb needs to be perfect, 1 year old. Take it from the sheep, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon. Then all of the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it between the evenings. Ben Erevim, that is between sunset and darkness. Guys, if you start realizing the detail, on the 10th of the new moon, which is the 10th of Nisan, Jesus came into the city of Jerusalem on a colt, on a donkey, prophesied by Zechariah. The people throw out palm branches and they cry out the words Hoshea now, means save us now. Please save us. I mean, what a cry out. We sing Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest, as if Hosanna is an exclamation of praise. Hosanna literally means please save us. You're the only one that can save us. Rescue us now. That's what the meaning of Shoshana. Anyway, so on the 10th of the month, Jesus enters the city of Jerusalem. And as we all know, on the 14th of Nisan, he gets crucified at the hand of both Jews and Gentiles, by the way. Not one of the two parties are necessarily guilty or not guilty. But a guy like Pontius Pilate, on the 14th of the new moon, tells everybody, an audience of mixed Gentile and Jew, I find no fault with this man, which is exactly which is exactly the commandment in Exodus 12, that the father of the household needs to declare this 1-year-old lamb, this lamb unblemished, which is exactly what Jesus goes through. Pontius Pilate doesn't even know what he's doing, but he says, I find no fault with this man, basically declaring Jesus to be blameless, unblemished. And then we know he gets crucified. And by the way, if you look into the details of his crucifixion, that's something we can look at Passover next year. But when you look at the details, Jesus fulfills everything that the text requires of him. And there's actually a bit of irony and humor to it. He fulfills it in time, to the point that God darkens the earth after he said it's finished, so that that part of the scripture could become true, because he needs to be dead between the evenings. Fascinating, and so forth and so forth. And the detail is just mind-blowing. I'm just touching on some of the Passover stuff here. We can go on next week to the Feast of Shavuot, although that's a very difficult feast. And then I want us to be prepped for the feast that's coming, because I believe there's super significance for us as believers, awaiting the second coming of Jesus, awaiting judgment, awaiting to live forever with God. And these things are foretold at the hand of the festivals that lies ahead. And I think it's very much worthwhile spending time. Any questions? I just wanted to repeat some of these Passover things tonight.
Helmut, I know in the past you've said, ja, sorry. Ek sukkel nog steeds met my kamera. Lyk my ek moet restart voordat hy gaan regkom.
No, but we can hear you. We can hear you.
I know you spoke about the Jubilee year that starts next year.
No, next year is the Shemitah. Not the Jubilee. The Jubilee only happens every 50th year.
Okay, yeah. So the Shemitah, does it start month or in the first month? What is your take on that? I know the Bible speaks of the 7th month. I just want to clarify if I understand it correct.
Ati, this is a very good question. Okay. The Jewish people celebrates 4 New Years. I don't even know what the others are. I know about 2 of them. The one that is celebrated around February, and it's called the New Year's of the Trees. And then there's one that's the Jews and sadly most Christians that has anything to do with Hebrew speak about Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah in Hebrew means head of the year, and they refer to Rosh Hashanah as the first day of the 7th month. The first day of the 7th month, the Bible is explicit, is a feast called the Feast of Trumpets. That is not the beginning of years. Exodus 12 verse 1 explicitly tells us the beginning of the year is in the month of Nisan or Aviv. Okay? The beginning of the year is in month 1, not in month 7. Not the way that there's a massive conspiracy going on. Why the Jewish people consider the 7th month as the beginning. So if you would go to Wikipedia and you would Google Rosh Hashanah, they would tell you expressly that the Jews view the 7th month as the beginning of the civil year, and they view the beginning of the first month as the biblical new year. Now, for crying in a bucket, I mean, it's like saying we start on month 5 because we like it. You know, you have to just spot the Adam and Eve story here. Yeah, let's start on the 7th month and let's hide the Feast of Trumpets altogether. Let's just bury it. You know, it's ridiculous. But so the Shemitah starts. The Shemitah starts on the first month. Therefore, it starts on the 19th of March next year.
Okay, excellent.
Give or take.
Yeah, because I was confused. And yeah, I know you were saying something to that effect, and I was thinking to myself, but the Jews are doing it in the 7th month, and I couldn't understand. So it's very important that we go and study the scriptures and make sure that we understand these feasts exactly as it is.
You know, Ati, super important. All I am suggesting and advocating, and I'm going on so many times, I repeat myself 1 billion times, is let us just read and hear what God says. And I think The invitation is so
Mm,
super simple. Let us start hearing what he says and doing what he
mm,
says. You know, there's a word for that. It's called Shema. Hear, O Israel.
mm,
Hear and act upon your hearing, O Israel, that Yahweh, our God, is
mm.
one. You know, therefore, the beginning of the months is in the month of Aviv or the month of Nisan, and that's
Yes.
super important that everything in our understanding follows suit. You know, as opposed to
Okay. Can I ask one?
yes,
Yeah.
for sure,
I want
go
to ask you one other thing though.
go for it.
I don't see in the Bible any pattern of 13s.
Yeah,
Um, but as you know, the Jews are Adar 1 and Adar 2 and sometimes. But I
yeah.
don't pick it up in the Bible. If I don't agree with that, am I stupid or keeping just the
Um,
12 months and not the,
okay,
because
okay,
for me,
yeah.
the word says Aviv, and I know of spring as well, but yeah. Okay, let me hear what you
Okay,
say.
very important. The word aviv has more than one meaning. It means spring, but it also means. Have you heard about the expression "the barley is aviv"? Aviv means it's ripe. So aviv, the
Yeah,
concept of
yeah.
the concept of spring in Hebrew means ripeness, readiness. It's an indication that
Mm,
there's a change in
mm,
season. So the use of checking whether the barley
mm,
is ready to be harvested is the indication of the beginning of the months. And
mhm,
therefore, it's not about counting to 12 or counting to
mm,
15. The only counting that you do is you count 6 days and you
mm,
rest on the seventh, and um, you count up to the months and the days within the months to keep with the festivals. But number one, the barley needs to be ripe. That's what the scripture is coming to.
okay.
You wait for this. So it's not about a
Mhm,
cycle of 13. It's you need to
mm,
understand the Hebraic worldview, and then this is what makes reading the Bible an interesting affair. You kind of need to read it with understanding, because you can't only follow a cycle
mm,
of 12. What would happen is, because the moon, a new moon happens every 29 days,
mm,
but you need an average of
mm,
almost 31 days to keep in sync with the sun. So within 12 months,
mm,
there is an
mm,
11-day lag introduced into the sun calendar. What would happen if you don't honor a leap year every
mm,
third year? The spring festival would end up in the middle of winter. And nothing of the agricultural significance would be
mm,
present
mm.
anymore. Makes
I
sense?
get it.
So you need to read what this. The scriptures never tells you to
Mm,
count 12
mhm,
months. It tells you to you wait for the barley to be aviv, to be
mm,
ripe. So this
mhm.
is, if does it make sense? It's a
Okay.
collateral. Is
I
it?
read the. Mhm.
Go for it now.
Yeah, I hear you. But what I've noticed is I've kept the calendar um, in a sense of looking for the moon. If I cannot see it because of it being cloudy or something, I would ask other people if they saw it. So I've been keeping it like that, and I've noticed that some days the month would run 2 days after 29 days, like a 31 or 30
Yeah,
before I see the new moon,
yeah, for
or
sure.
the sliver of the moon, as they call it. Whereas other months it's dead like 29 and so on. So and I read something interesting, and I think it was in Numbers, but I will have to go and check it, and then I'll come back to you on WhatsApp maybe, where Moses speaks of the barley or the wheat, I'm not sure, and the ears of it. Um, um, and I don't know if the scriptures are translating it wrong, but it doesn't seem like it's specifically. Then I'll come back to you on that one.
Absolutely. The only thing is, if you read Exodus 13, it says, and Moshe said to the people, "Remember this day in which you were which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. For by strength of the hand of Yahweh brought you out of this place. And and
Mm,
whatever is leavened should not be eaten. Today you are going out in the new moon Aviv." I know it's unclear. The Bible doesn't tell us go and look at the barley. Actually, by the way, I haven't found that passage.
Mhm.
I'm on a very good resource here, and I don't know if the Bible explicitly tells us to go watch if the barley is Aviv,
Yeah.
but the reference to the name of the month is implied.
I never saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, just check Exodus
Yeah.
13 verse
But
4.
yeah, did okay. I'll do that, and then I'll go and look up that verse on Numbers, and then I'll come back to you on that one as well.
Yeah. Please send it to me. I'm not a boffin on any of these things. I'm just curious. I mean, the more I read it, I just realize that God is really making a point about us getting in sync with His calendar.
Asking because I want to make sure. Yeah. I want to make sure that I stay as through the Zoom session so much. But I think everybody on it enjoys digging into the Word and finding out what God wants from us.
For sure.
And I thank you for that.
No, absolutely. You're welcome, man. As long as everybody on this group stays curious.
Wait, I've got to go, guys.
Yeah, Ati, take care, bro. You speak again.
Okay, I've got to go.
Bless.
Yes,
I got to
brother.
go as well. Okay, yeah, let's wrap this. Bless, Ati, we speak again. Okay, anybody else? Any questions, any suggestions, anything else? Nobody? Sorry, guys. I know this is a little bit of an academic and a little bit of a difficult subject, but once you start spotting Yeshua in all of this, it becomes next level fascinating. I can promise you this is not about wanting people to be enslaved to keeping programs and calendars. It's not about that. It is about finding the fascination that is Christ. And if that's the only thing you remember of this, you don't need to remember anything. I'm always available to help remind people whatever the days. I mark them on my calendar, and I let my colleague know. Sorry, I'm not here. I'm not an office. And yesterday we had a day like that, and I just looked at the whole of the month of September and say, sorry, I'm out for 5 days. I'm out for like whatever. I'm out. And I know it's not that easy for everybody. Some people have bosses, this is God has complete understanding for that. But if you can make a point of making time for God on those days, I believe it's worth it. Lekker. Okay. Anybody else? Chantal, I know you want to say something.
Nee, nie vanaand nie, ek's te moeg.
Okay, what did you do? What did you do?
I'm actually working really hard at the moment.
Oh, very good. Very good. I don't know what that means anymore, but thank you. No, actually, I've also been working hard today. Anyhow, thank you for everybody's prayers when I was in hospital. Really super appreciated. And I know a lot of you have really prayed with me. I've slept for 6 nights. It's the first 6 nights in a row that I can remember since I've been a little boy that I've slept in a row. I've done 7, 8, 9, 10 hours every night now, and I feel like $1 billion. So thank you so much for everyone's prayers.
I need some of your drugs.
The what?
I need some of your drugs.
Dorminoct. I'll type it out for you. It knocks you. You have to sit on the edge of your bed when you drink it. Otherwise, you wake up in strange places in the house. Dorminoct. If you need a prescription, I'll write one for you. Okay, guys, are you well? Otherwise, yes. Why don't you say a word? Nobody says a word. Only Chrissy, only Kerry wants some of my sleeping medication.
I would love some of your sleeping medication.
Dorminoct. I'll send you a picture of my box of Dorminoct. I love them. Okay. Was this helpful? Yeah. No?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alles.
All good.
Yeah. Thank you. I think women know a lot about cycles, so for us it's nothing new.
True.
You see, this whole lesson is more for men, and where's all the men? Danny, luckily you're there. But Brian, hello, Brian.
Is it only me? No, I'm also still here.
Okay, good. Yeah, don't leave me alone. No, you're actually super right. Like in our Greek world, and this is really my closing line. In our Greek world, there are a number of cycles. We're used to that, but we forget that everything is cycles. You know, very little in life is just starting somewhere and ending somewhere. Even life and death in Hebrew is a cycle. You know, that's why getting kids is important, so that you don't end, but you continue in your next generation, whatever. Anyhow, okay. All good.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry I'm late.
Lekker. Okay, come
That was
visit.
good.
Come
Thank
visit
you.
our new playground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, have a good one.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Ciao,
Thank
ciao.
you.